welcome back to the podcast. I'm the host, Sean Boyce. I'd like to welcome my guest to the show today, who has been here before, and thank you for being back, Brian. Brian Casel, the founder of ClarityFlow. How are you, Brian?
Hey, Sean, doing good. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, super excited to talk updates and a lot more from there. It sounds like there's been a lot in terms of development on the ClarityFlow side. So before we get there, if you wouldn't mind just refreshing kind of our audience, yourself, your background, so they can learn a little bit more about you, and then we'll dive into the updates.
Sure. So, I'm a product person. Full stack product designer, software. I come from a background as a designer, and then going back, I had a few different companies that I built and sold. Sold off everything in 2021. I used to do more like service stuff, consulting, and then productize services and marketing and all that. But ultimately, I landed on SaaS, and I've been at this for a couple of years now. And this latest product is ClarityFlow. It was previously named ZipMessage. I was running it under the name ZipMessage for about 2 years, and then just recently, this year in 2023, we've rebranded to ClarityFlow, and I could talk more about that whole story. But today it's a product for asynchronous messaging, especially for coaches communicating with clients, having like asynchronous video, audio, text messages, like threaded messages back and forth. But now, as ClarityFlow is growing, we're getting into payments for coaches, like selling access to your coaching, running coaching programs, and hosting courses, really designed like courses for coaches who do like some personalized help with the content, and then spaces, so like bringing together coaching groups, communities, and doing all that under the hood of this like asynchronous messaging platform, essentially. So it's sort of a lot there, but it really all revolves around asynchronous conversations. Being able to record a message, send it to someone, they watch it, they send it back to you, and it's all in a threaded conversation.
There's been a few people in my network since we spoke on the last time we recorded an episode together that have shared with me different new methods of communication asynchronously, including audio and whatnot. And I'm always thinking about ClarityFlow since they're mentioning that, and other stuff that we talked about as well too, in terms of like even building a business, building software, running SaaS, all that kind of stuff, and just how much can be done asynchronously.
It's incredible.
Into it. It's super powerful.
We've like more than leaned into it. My team and I, we literally don't have calls, live calls. We're 100% asynchronous, and I'm not. It's weird. It's a little bit weird, but I'm not exaggerating. Like we literally just have we use like Slack, and we use GitHub issues and stuff like that when we're working on stuff. But we do have like video meetings where they're seeing my face, they're seeing my screen, I'm seeing their response. We're collaborating together on things, but we're doing it across the world, across time zones, and spread out at a time that makes sense. But we can really still have the same level of collaboration as if we're on a live call together. I actually would even argue that it's better because we have space in between our collaboration. So I could ask something, and then my marketing assistant can think about it and do some work and jot down some notes, and then get back to me with her thoughts, and then I digest that and I get back. So I really think that communicating asynchronously and having these meetings at like a slower, more spread out pace really, really helps a lot.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And like we see it, obviously most of our users use it for client communication. So you can not only like scale your client coaching or consulting with these asynchronous threads, but again, it sort of makes it like an even better experience to have like a deep conversation using a lot of them use like audio only messages or video messages. So yeah, it works really well.
Definitely powerful stuff. I mean, I can't help but think sometimes nowadays when I'm on one-to-one meetings, or even worse, if I'm in a group setting, that so many meetings and so much time and effort and energy is largely wasted because only one person can be talking at a time, right? So if you got a meeting with like 10 people on it, or it grows even larger than that, just the cost to hold that session when most people aren't really doing much. So asynchronous for the win all day there.
That is what always amazes me. Just thinking about like the pure waste of time and money to have like 8 different people on the same meeting. I mean, that's literally like 7 people are not working right now, you know?
Right. 100%.
And,
Totally agree.
and also, but again, like getting back to it, like I really also think that like if you're on a live call, you're sort of on the spot. If you ask a question, the other or someone asks a question of you, you have to have an answer right now. So you're just going to blurt out whatever the first thing that comes to mind is, and that might not be your best idea. You might not have, taken some time. When you're asynchronous, you can jot down some notes, you can do some research, you can tighten it up, and then offer it.
Yes, I want to live in this world. So let's talk more about updates since we talked last, because we're excited to talk about quite a bit. So yeah, share with us since we did the last recording. Obviously, there's been the rebrand. I think there's some other changes as well too. Talk to us about what progress has looked like and what changes you put in place and why.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really jam-packed year so far, with changing over from ZipMessage to ClarityFlow, and we're recording this, right at the end of May into June, and I'd say at this point we're basically complete with that transition. Like we've transitioned the website, everything redirects now to ClarityFlow. The app and product all lives on ClarityFlow. We've also changed our pricing. We're rolling out a whole bunch of new features. We have mobile apps coming out. We've got all these other stuff coming out. But it's been a lot of work to get the ClarityFlow brand launched, and a lot of under the hood stuff that was really difficult to work through, especially the domain stuff. And I mean, we're not talking about just redirecting the marketing site domain to the new one. It's also the app, which was on zipmessage.com. Like we actually used the root domain for our account, like the customers' accounts. And we've transitioned all of them to like subdomains on ClarityFlow. So that combined with a billing update, which was also not just a price change, but it was like we changed the model. We went from freemium to, not freemium. And so it was just a lot of under the hood work, which was, I'm glad that it's all behind us now, because it did take us off of our product roadmap for a little while just to get that stuff transitioned over. But now we're back to like really actively working through these features.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it'd be hard to, something that seems simple or straightforward is like, we're going to change our name. Depending on how much you have to change because of that, it can be unassuming in terms of the impact that's going to have elsewhere. Like you said, pulling you away from the product roadmap and just how much is involved. So be curious to hear you maybe talk a little bit more about the motivation to go through with the change, any lessons learned from it as well too. And then I definitely want to hear more about the change in pricing model, as in like what led you to want to make an adjustment, and then what was making the change like, and have you seen any results of that yet?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, just the decision to actually change the name of the business, I didn't want to do it at all. Because I knew that I just knew how much work it was, and I wasn't necessarily really tied or in love with the name ZipMessage, but I did want to avoid having to change the domain and the brand and all that, because it is a lot of work, and it turned out to be a lot of work, like even more than I expected. But what happened was, like last year, 2022, middle of the year or so, was when I started to do a really deep dive into customer research, figuring out like who are our users on ZipMessage. Like I had an idea, but it was really a wide array of different users and use cases. So I wanted to better understand like who are the best users and who's getting the absolute most value out of this product. I pretty quickly learned that it was coaches. I had seen coaches using it since day one. They were always a segment for us, but like it started once I started to do a whole lot of customer interviews in 2022. I really started to realize like everyone else who's using our product is using it in a very like light way. Like it's kind of a useful tool for them, but they could easily swap it out with something else. Whereas the coaches were using it in a much more central, like essential thing that actually ran their whole business and their client communications. So I dug into that some more, and I did a whole lot more interviews with all coaches. And I spent really most of last year doing that, just researching and understanding everything that I could about how coaches are not only using our tool, but the other 2 or 3, 4 tools that they're duct taping together to do what they want to do to run their business. And I started to really get super clear on like, okay, they're using us for this async stuff, and they're trying to duct tape us on top of a course software over here. And then they also have a community group area over here and some group forum software or a Slack or something or a Facebook group. And then they do payments, maybe manual invoicing, maybe a Stripe account. And they're trying to like Zapier duct tape all these things together, which we do have a Zapier integration, but it's still just sort of a clunky experience for most of these coaching programs. And so once I started to really learn all about that, it became clear that like, okay, we have a really good async conversations, async messaging solution, but we're still missing like 2 or 3 or 4 of these other components that a coach is trying to piece together in a really seamless, integrated way. And so that's where the vision for what is now ClarityFlow started to come together. So like if you look at our site now, it's like, yeah, we're still like an async conversations at the core, but we're building into more of a platform to run an entire coaching business. So I got to really understand like exactly what they're trying to do. And then that informed all the features that we're rolling out now.
Awesome. Quick question there.
And I mean, actually, like, well, back to the name change, like, the name ZipMessage, I got feedback from a lot of people through that research process saying like, ZipMessage doesn't sound like the direction that you're going. And also the name ZipMessage sounds, and it's associated more with just like a free or a cheap messaging tool. So it doesn't really, what convinced me finally in early 2023 was like, we have to go through with a name change. It was that like, if this new direction, pivot, repositioning is going to have any chance of success, like the name ZipMessage would actually detract from that. So
that's super interesting and great data and insight and feedback, right? That's a thing. That's something I figured out about naming. Number one, I've always gravitated towards thematic naming. I just did a podcast episode on that as well too. That's a whole other topic. But the other piece is like, it can be difficult to predict how people are going to interpret whatever the name is or means or their interaction with it. You know what I mean? So I love that you have the research and the data that speaks to feedback on it, and that influenced the decision as well. And then another question I had was, what analytics or tools, if any, did you use to try to like segment your audience into? Here are folks that are kind of using it semi-frequently or passively, and here are folks that are using it regularly, like it's a clear pattern in this group.
We didn't really, well, okay. So I guess there are a few different tools that I used. In terms of just like talking to customers, it was just a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of, at the time it was called ZipMessage. So we were using my own tool for a lot of asynchronous.
Love it.
But I mean, I didn't do it entirely asynchronously when I was doing customer research calls. I did have a whole lot of just live Zoom calls. And the reason for that was because a lot of them were like 45 minutes to an hour of like deep dive, like jobs to be done style interviews. And I did a lot of them asynchronously as well. It's just that it does drag out over a longer period of time when it's async. So it was kind of a combination of both for a lot of
mix.
In terms of other tools, like, so every call was recorded and logged in, we would save them in Dropbox, but then we had a big Notion database of every call, some notes about the call and who this customer is, when they started using the product. Or in some cases, they're not users of the product. We were just interviewing all different coaches. But aside from the actual talking to customers, I was also analyzing data. So I use Mixpanel to look at like usage data in the product, ChartMogul to look at the stats on the business. So I was looking at that stuff. And also we have a lot of custom reporting stuff built into our own database to get a good understanding of like we have like an onboarding survey that every user goes through. So when they start using the product, they check like what their main use case is, and then that all gets fed into our mix panel, into our chart mogul, so we could literally see how much MRR is coming from people who say that they're using it for coaching.
That's awesome.
So I could
Love
start
that.
to like kind of break it down by that, and like all those different pointers, whether it was conversations or usage data, it all pointed to like coaches are by far the best use case for us.
Cool. I think another nugget in there that you just mentioned is related to the custom reporting that you might create for your own product, as in plenty of great other options out there too that you can just kind of bolt on or add as part of the experience. But over time, as you start to learn, where the activation points are, what you want to track in terms of what is separating different segments of the audience. Like I'm working on building an admin panel for one of my products now too, and there really isn't like an off the shelf to build me exactly always what I want, but we're building software, right? So we can kind of build a little bit.
And even if you're going to use one of the popular, like we use Mixpanel and Chart Mogul, and for like email marketing stuff, I use Customer IO. All of those they're not just plug it in and you could do some basic stuff when you just plug it in, but to get any meaningful data out of it, I mean, we have literally spent hundreds of developer hours, my own hours and my team's hours, to integrate all the data from our customers and users into tools like Mixpanel and Chart Mogul, to really be able to see the graphs that we need to be able to see. Like you can't just plug it in. It's a lot of work.
It's non-trivial. It's a lot of work. It's true.
I mean, I've been thinking about that problem for a long time, and the only way that I really see that working is like a consulting model. Like, and there are consultants that you could hire to do this, but like someone who really has technical chops, they can work with your database, and they can integrate a mix panel or an amplitude or a whatever you need to get it like dialed into whatever you need. And then we have our own custom stuff, nothing super fancy there, but just stuff that's like very specific to our own database, like how many people record, like what's the average recording length of a message, or like video versus audio only, and like stuff like that.
Agreed. Yeah, it's nice to have that custom stuff. Be interesting to take a look at the numbers there too, in terms of if we were to go back and evaluate how long it takes us to set up an off-the-shelf tool versus actually build our own. Pretty interesting, but definitely to be considered, right? Just the takeaway here, I think, is it's not off the shelf plug and play always. In order to get it to do what it is you want it to do, it actually might be more expensive or time to set up something that is expected to be easier to plug in than sometimes even building your own, but especially for the custom stuff.
And really last year, like it really frustrated me in terms of like how many hours we were spending on just dialing in Mixpanel and Chart Mogul. And believe me, I love those tools. I think that they're fantastic products, but it is not easy to get them up and running. And what was frustrating me about it was that like this was at a time last year, and we're still in this like startup phase where running after like product market fit, like trying to ship features that our customers need, but we need that visibility, we need the data, so we have to be able to report on the data. We have to spend hours being able to report, and those are hours where we're not building features. But it's all about priorities, right? Like I could push the setting up Mixpanel and stuff to down the road. We'll deal with that later. But then you go months without reporting all that data, so it's like that was really frustrating for a while. But we've got it all.
Chicken and egg problem. That's a really good point, though. I think, especially when you start to gain traction with your product, right? Prioritization becomes critically important, because if you put the wrong step in front of the step that should have been prioritized, like you said, you could pause something that's really important at a really, really critical moment, like an inflection point. So that's well 100%. Articulated also.
That's definitely, to me, I agree. That is the hardest and most critical thing and you're not going to get it right. Like you're definitely going to work on things that I know I look back on things like we should not have done things in that order, or I spent too much time on this versus that. But I look at it like a batting average. You want to just keep that average up, and get more hits than misses. So like,
said. Let's talk a little bit about pricing, because I know you made some changes there. And if I remember correctly, you were saying that it was freemium before, but you've changed from that. I'd love to hear a little bit more from the strategy and behind making that decision. Maybe what performance looked like before, if that's officially been implemented and everything already thus far. And if you have any after the fact data or results on that so far in terms of like, did it help move the needle in the right direction?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start by just saying that like this is not, I don't misread this as like you should not do freemium or you should do freemium or you should price this way or that way. It's literally a different strategy for every different business. And that's actually what happened, right? Like the worldview around what this product is and the go-to-market strategy all changed when the strategy changed from ZipMessage to ClarityFlow. So in the ZipMessage world, the idea pretty early on was, it was a low-priced product, and it was competing in the same sort of space as like Loom and even Slack and like Voxer and like other chat apps that are either free or very low cost. So, like given that, like we had to not just because they were free, we had to have a free option, but it was also like, this is the strategy. If we can get a lot of free users, they can use it for free and share it. And we can start to see that viral thing happening where if you start a message here and you communicate with someone, then they start using it and then they can spread it to their clients or their organization. We had it going like that using a freemium model for about a year. So we had like a free plan, free forever plan, and then we had like a $19 plan and a $39 plan, I think. It worked. It was going for about a year, and it basically worked fine. But it was other issues. What ultimately happened was, the freemium strategy for us didn't have the intended effect. Like we still saw some MRR growth, but we didn't see that top of funnel like explosion in like, oh, this is a free tool that like so many people are using. So because freemium essentially is a marketing strategy. You're trying to get a lot of free users so that you can convert a percentage of them. What we ended up seeing in terms of the viral growth was that the virality was coming from paid users. It wasn't coming from free users.
Interesting.
So what a lot of people were doing was starting on the free plan and then converting to our paid plans, like sometimes same day, sometimes within like 3 days. But typically with a freemium strategy, you sort of want to see like lots of free users actively using the free plan for a long time and then upgrading, but like using it actively and sharing it. So having like a super generous free plan, I think ours was pretty limited. But then kind of fast forward to all the customer research and pivoting into being a tool for coaches and growing the use case. Now we're in a completely different space. Now we're in a space where, again, they're sort of duct taping together a messaging tool and a course tool and a community tool and a payments tool. And so in that world, like freemium isn't, not only is it not necessary, it's like it doesn't really help the activation and onboarding process for a coach. So now we're more of a product with a traditional free trial. You can use all of our power features for free for 2 weeks. You can do a demo with me or someone on my team, and we'll help you understand how you can like structure your coaching business, using what we offer. And it's a much more like intentional, like evaluating this product as like a thing to power your coaching business.
So it seems like a better fit as well too for what your target market is now also expecting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's even interesting to me now, like with our new site on ClarityFlow, you can just go on there and sign up for a free trial, but like tiny link at the bottom is like, you could request a demo, and it's not even like a fancy demo thing yet. I haven't optimized this flow or anything, but it just goes to like a super simple contact form. And I'm getting contact requests for demos all the time. multiple per
Smaller.
week. Well, yeah, but it's just interesting because it's like these people could just go trial the product for free, no credit card up front,
They want
but
a demo.
they just want to like talk through it. And they're not just like, they're like serious, actually larger coaching companies who want to go that route. So it's interesting to see like that's how they prefer to buy a product like this.
Yeah, that's super fascinating, isn't it? I've had the same with some of my products as well, where almost sometimes building it in terms of it, you expect it to be completely product led and they go into the product first and whatnot, isn't always what the target market wants. Now, in some of those instances, once they get in the product, they may be fine, but they want a different kind of onboarding flow that you're describing here. So I think it's important to know that as well, too, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's like product led, all the things, right? And that may or may not be what's right for your target market. You're giving a perfect example where it seems like there's a lot of preference for wanting to take more of a demo led approach, which, assuming that's not a really intense volume and amount of time upfront or an extended period of time, then that could very well still work quite well.
Yeah. I mean, I hope we get more and more volume on that, and we'll grow the customer success team and of people who will work directly with like I would love that,
So much
I think there's a lot of
discovery and research too, right? Because you get an early touch point.
It's great. I had one this morning, and it's just another, and it's also interesting to see the difference between the customer research calls that I was doing all of last year and early this year. That's just let me pick your brain about your whole work and your world so I can learn. But now I'm getting these inbound demo requests. So they are sales calls. It's not a whole lot different in terms of like the dynamic. Like I'm still like a laid back kind of like asking a lot of questions, but it helps me understand like, all right, if somebody is on a demo call, they requested this time, they're here to like get their objections answered, or they have a list of key questions that they need answered before they can make a buying decision. So it's incredibly valuable research for me to understand like what are those questions, and I got to do enough of them. I did this in my previous business where I did hundreds of sales calls for that was audience ops, and after 40 or 50 of them you start to really see like, oh, it's the same 3 or 4 questions that every client has. So then you just start to understand like, well, we have to have perfect answers to these questions, and not just saying them, but like that's how we build the product is to answer these questions.
Totally. That's a great point. It influences all the way to and through the product. Probably also some marketing material, the web page, how you write, how you kind of articulate the value, all that kind of stuff. That's amazing. I love having that workflow set up that way. We learned so much and upfront. And like you said, over time, the patterns really start to materialize.
For sure.
Super exciting. There's so much I could talk to you about all this stuff because it's amazing always doing these update calls. I appreciate you being here and sharing all of this information about ClarityFlow. Sounds like exciting success. Before we let you go, a couple questions, obviously. The first was going to be like, what's next from here? And then who should be, where can people go to learn more about you and ClarityFlow? Yeah.
So, clarityflow.com is our site. And
place to start.
I'm personally kind of I'm still active on Twitter. I haven't left the ship yet. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at CastJam. And also, by the way, I co-host a podcast called Bootstrapped Web with my buddy Jordan. And it's really not different from this. It's a lot of behind the scenes talking about what we're working on. What is happening right now? So I don't know when this is coming out, but we are coming pretty close to, like, we've been working on 4 or 5 pretty big features all at the same time. We've got multiple developers working on different parts of the app right now. But the next things that we're going to be shipping we have mobile apps for iOS and Android coming out together. That should be coming in June or July. We've got this thing called Programs, which is like courses and interactive automated async coaching programs. A thing called Spaces, which is like community spaces, and then Payments is in the beginning stages. So that'll be coming in the summer. So Payments with like Stripe Connect and everything, kind of all integrated. So those are all at like varying stages of development. And then I think once we get this stuff really shipped. It's time to go back through our new account onboarding flows and update all of that, and have like all new customer case studies and all new guides on how to use the product. Because we have a lot of stuff that like it's still accurate information on there, like in our help desk, but under the name ClarityFlow and all these new features that are coming out, we should just have to like have a more cohesive way to like learn how to piece everything together.
Well, it sounds like a lot of exciting updates and changes coming. It'd be great to have you back talking about how that process has gone thus far. And then I know we have other topics we want to dive into as well, too, in terms of like content and growth and all that kind of stuff as well, too. So aside of that story, we can add to that process as well, too. But thanks again, Brian, for being here and sharing these updates. It's helpful for sure for myself and our audience.
Yeah, Sean, thanks for having me on. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Product Launch. I hope you got value out of it. I like to feature product people on my podcast because that's who I love to help. I'm a product strategist, and I can help you scale your business and grow your profit through a product. If you'd like to learn more about how I can help you, email me at sean@nextstep.io. That's Sean, S-E-A-N, at nextstep, nxtstep.io. Or visit my website at nextstep.io. That's nxtstep.io.